being able to get to the place where I could truly just hold my hands open and say, "Thy will be done," is a very freeing place to be as a mom. When you actually get to the point where you want God's will for your children more than you want your own will for your children, then you can find a peace.
Brooke, welcome back to Focus. Good to have you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here again.
Let's start with the disclaimer. We have covered praying for your teen daughters. So
Yes.
for those moms who go, what about our daughters? Look in the archive, get the app. All the shows are there, and you can search that and find that. But today, it's about praying for your teen sons, which being a father of two boys, I'm grateful for. You too are a mother of two boys.
Yes, I am.
How's that gone? Have they done so many things that you pulled your hair out?
Oh, yes. I mean, I just had my roots done before I came, and I'm fairly certain that the amount of gray hair I have is their fault. No, it's been fantastic. I love being a mom of boys. Kind of like you just said in the opening, there's just nothing that brings me any more joy than being a mom of two boys. People often said to us, "Aren't you going to try again for a girl?" And I said, no, I actually prayed and asked God to give us boys. I wanted boys. And God, in his infinite sense of humor, gave me that wish, gave me that
you
prayer.
Want boys? I'm giving you boys.
Yeah. And then sometimes I have looked back and thought, what in the world was I thinking in doing that? But it was good.
I don't know about you, but one of the things I as a dad, I did miss not having a daughter. Mm-hmm. I wish that would have come our direction. But when you moms get together, you moms of boys, mm-hmm. What do you think about when you talk about raising boys? I think for us, it's more the activity. Mm-hmm. When dads talk about, it's great. Bobby's on the varsity team and he's blah, 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 blah. That's what we do as dads of boys. Yeah. What do moms of boys talk about?
Well, I don't think you can take that part of it away. Both of my boys are athletes. And so the groups of moms that I hang out with do tend to talk about what little Tommy did at the game or, whatever. There's an element of that too, that I think moms do. But also, if you have the privilege of being able to raise your boys in a group of moms who all have the same goals as you do, like you all are trying to raise godly men as much as it depends on you, then the conversations tend to go in that direction. When my boys started into the teenage years, there was this fear that I could no longer control some of the things that
happened about age 5,
maybe around 5. Yeah. No, I mean, when they're little, you can physically restrain them, right? Yeah. Now, both of my boys are multiple inches taller than I am and can pick me up and do frequently. But I just think, there's this realization that you cannot control and that the decisions that they're making matter now, where you could cover over them when they were younger, but you can't do that once they reach a certain age. And so for me, being able to and it took me a while to get here, I will confess that, but being able to get to the place where I could truly just hold my hands open and say, "Thy will be done," is a very freeing place to be as a mom. When you actually get to the point where you want God's will for your children more than you want your own will for your children, then you can find a peace in knowing that no matter what God is doing or what you can't see, the work that you can't see him doing right now, that there is more than just now. There's more to come for them, and that whatever God is doing is going to be good. He's going to use it for his glory. So there's a release.
Let me ask you uniquely, what are boys facing when, again, you talk amongst your mom friends? Mm-hmm. What's the perception of what boys are facing in the culture today that might be different from girls?
I think the biggest thing, and maybe I would imagine that this is a conversation you guys have often because it is a big issue, is the way that their phones and social media are impacting their ability to have relationships and their ability to process and the examples that they're being given of what is good and right and true. They're not necessarily looking to the family as much to define what that looks like, or even to the church as much to define what that looks like. They're looking at TikTok reels to tell them what's funny. And as I look at TikTok reels, as opposed to, with the exception of maybe the ones about cats and dogs, most of them are not that funny. Mm-hmm. The ones that they're looking to define things are actually teaching them ways of communicating with their peers that are destructive and hurtful and really tearing each other down. I think there's a tear down culture among today's teenagers that is devastating, but it is very difficult because it's become so common. And I do talk about this in the book, Lord, place a guard over his mouth. That's one of my biggest prayers for my teen boys, is that God would teach them the power of their words, because words have the ability to give life or to take life. And so to me, that's one of the most important things that we're dealing with in today's world. And some parents, because my generation, your all's generation, we didn't grow up with those things in our hands. And so I think there's this tendency to just say, well, it's too big for me. I don't really know what to do with it. And then take a hands-off approach. Yeah. And I would encourage moms and dads not to take a hands-off approach on that particular issue, but to press in and figure it out for the sake of your teenagers.
You know, you had a beautiful story in the book about a moment you had looking at, I think your 18-year-old or your son, and seeing something. What happened?
So this actually was my oldest son, and it was a couple years ago, right before he turned 18. He had come into the kitchen and was on his way out into to go to baseball practice, and we were laughing together. And as I had stated mentioned a second ago, he picked me up to hug me, and when he did that, he hugged me so tight that it caused me to squeak. Like, it just kind of made a noise come out of me, which we both thought was really hysterical. And when he laughed, I saw his nose crinkle up. And when his nose crinkled up, I immediately had this flashback to seeing that same facial expression on him as a child, as a young child. And it felt like this moment where my insides were constricted as much as he was constricting me on the outside with that hug. And I thought to myself in that moment how powerful. I am one of the only human beings on the planet that has the privilege of seeing that look and knowing the boy that got to that point. Yeah. And it was just a very powerful moment for me to realize how far God had brought him, and yet I could still see the little boy.
The little boy in him. Yeah, that's such a sweet story. You know, you've written this book, Praying for Teen Boys. You know, at times I pray harder, better, more on target than at other times. I'm assuming there are parents of teen boys who don't fully understand the power of prayer, and that's okay. It's not a hit. What is a good definition of prayer, and how do we apply it in a regular way so that we're doing our part as a parent? And maybe talk about the components of that, what it does for you, what it does for the Lord in terms of opening up the windows of heaven for those prayers, and then ultimately what it does for your son.
Yeah. I like Tim Keller's definition of prayer. He says that it's a conversation that God started with us. And so many times I have moms that will come to me and say, Brooke, it feels weird. God is not sitting physically right beside me. And so it feels odd I know I should pray. I want to pray, but it feels weird. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know how to start. And so for me, that truth that it's a conversation that God started actually helps, because I don't have to start it. He already started it. It's a partnership that he's inviting me into. It's not a vending machine where I put in what I think of as a good prayer, and then God gives me the exact answer that I want. That's not the way it works. He's still God. He loves us and he cares about us, but he can say yes, he can say no, or he can say wait. And he has told me wait a lot of times in my life. And I think sometimes that rubs us the wrong way. We don't like that when God says no. We don't like that. We want to define what's good, right? And we forget that God is the one that gets to define what's good, and that he has all of eternity, the whole kingdom that he's trying to bring in, to work with, not just us. But it helps me to understand that the God of heaven, who in Psalm 116:2 says he bends down to listen to us. He is bent toward us. His posture is one that is toward us. invites us to join with him in prayer for our kids. And it isn't just about, Lord, would you help him to be safe today? Lord, would you help him to do well on that test today? I know he studied so hard. Lord, would you help him keep him safe in the car today or whatever? It isn't just that. It's proactive prayers that are inviting God into his life. And that's really what this book is about. It tackles the idea of prayer from the perspective of actually praying God's word over our children in a proactive way, not just waiting until prayer is the last resort, but actually making it the first and best thing that we do as moms. Like, we're going to God and we're praying purposefully and intentionally for these areas of his life that are some of the most important things that he has to deal with. And then we're waiting to see how God responds and shows up.
Jean and I, we often pray for our boys to draw closer to the Lord. It's an obvious one. The Lord's omnipresent. I mean, he's there for them always. But for them in their hearts to recognize the Lord and to draw toward him is really critical.
Yeah.
So that's one of the prayer habits that we have, just open their hearts up to see spiritual things and spiritual truth. Something you learned is that you have to pray for yourself. Now, a lot of moms, talk about the last person on earth that thinks about it. It's a mom about praying for herself. But you said that that was really critical for you, and you prayed specifically, Lord, show me. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, when my oldest son was about 15 years old, we were on our way to a sports practice that was out of town, and he was spilling his heart to me, just telling me something that was going on in his life. And he paused and asked me a question. I'm so grateful as a 15-year-old that he wanted to know my opinion, but because I know that doesn't always happen. But he asked me, he said, Mom, what should I do? And in that moment, I did not know what to do. I did not know the answer. And that was probably the first time in a long, what would happen to be a long, line of things that I would not have the answer to in his life. In fact, most of the time, I don't know the answers that they're looking for. But I paused and I said, I'm going to need to pray about that, and I'm going to have to get back to you on that. And my prayer, as that story was unfolding, as I was listening to him share his heart with me, was, Lord, would you show me? What do I need to say to him in this moment? What are the right words? How do I validate what he said? Show me how to guide him. Show me what to do. Show me what to say. And God says in his word that when we ask for wisdom, he'll give it. Not just a little bit, he'll give it liberally. And so for me in that moment, and in many, many moments like it that have come since, I have just been inviting the Lord to come and show me what I need to know in that moment to personalize what needs to happen in that son's life. And I've just never found him to not meet me where I am.
Yeah,
he
that's so
always comes. It might not be right that second. It might be after a couple weeks of prayer or maybe seeking wise counsel, but he always comes and shows me what I need to know for my particular child in the right time.
Hey, allow me to interrupt for just a moment here to say how much we appreciate you watching. Now, if you find value in this content, subscribe by clicking below. It'll be a big help to us. Let's go ahead and return to the show.
Brooke, another prayer that you had in the book was interesting to me because it was very specific. Lord, help me keep his heart. I guess there needs to be a little definition about what did that mean for you and where did you come up with that prayer?
Yeah, I had the privilege many years ago, even before I had children, of listening to a precious mom, her name was Ruth Ann, teach what was essentially a biblical parenting 101 class. And her kids were grown and she was full of wisdom. But when she shared that one of her main goals in her parenting was to keep her children's hearts, it just, I didn't hear anything else that she said. There was something about that deeply resonated with me. And so I asked her in the book to help me understand, what does that mean? And I think the heart of what she was talking about is that if we can keep our children's hearts turned toward us, if we can keep deep relationship with our children over the years, then it'll be easier to go through the hard things when they come. It doesn't mean that it'll be easy to go through the hard things when they come, but if we have a foundation of relationship with them, if we have communicated to them, I love you and there's nothing that you could ever do to make me not love you. I will fight for you. I am on your side. We are in this together. I believe in you. I love you the way you are, but I am full of hope for who God's going to make you into. If we can convey that in the early years to our kids and keep their hearts turned toward us, then it becomes easier for them to turn their hearts toward the Lord when the time comes. And that is what that means.
And it seems like such a simple truth, but we struggle as human beings and in our flesh as parents to really embrace that. I mean, the Lord says, I love you unconditionally. There's nothing you can do that'll take me away from you. You don't test that. You don't say, oh, okay, and therefore I'll go sin, right? It's kind of this reciprocal thing that the Lord loves you so much, your response needs to be love back to him. We know that in our relationship with the Lord, but we don't think it applies in our relationship with our children. Wow.
Yeah.
And it does.
It does. It absolutely does. My younger son got in trouble at school one day, and he did, yes. And by the way, my kids approved every story that's in the book.
So you can out him.
I can out him. He already knows. He already knows that it's talked about.
He outed himself.
He did. He totally did. I was really upset with him about this. In the grand scheme of things, it was a fairly benign offense, but he did get in trouble in school. And when I picked him up from school that day, this was several years ago before he could drive, I looked at him and I wanted to give him time to share his story. I want to get his side, right? Like I totally respect the authority that God's put in his life at school, and I respect their right to have their opinion, but I always want to communicate to my kid, I want to hear you too. But before we even did that, he got in the car and he was like just all physically slumped over, like he knew he was in trouble. And I looked at him and I just put my hand on his leg and I said, there is nothing you could ever do that would make me not love you. And that has been a defining thing in our lives for our children. I say that to them over and over again. No matter what you do, even if you end up living a life that is totally opposite of what I hope God will do for you, you can't make me not love you. There's nothing you can do. I might not like you very much. I might not like the decisions that you make all the time. I might realistically be disappointed in you at times. I was disappointed in him that day for doing what he did, but it doesn't change the fact that I love him. And if he can get that, then I become a safe place for him. It becomes, you've maybe seen it on social media, these memes that say, I don't want my kid to get in trouble and say, oh no, I can't tell dad or I can't tell mom. I wanted to create an environment where my kids would say, oh, I need to go tell mom.
When you were young, you experienced a hurricane. I haven't actually interviewed a lot of hurricane survivors, so this is fun. I know all of you in Florida, the Support Focus, thank you very much, and the Gulf Coast, and of course North Carolina and all those places. What did that do to you? What kind of impression did that make on you that you apply now to your parenting?
Yeah, I think we don't get a lot of weather like that in southwestern Virginia. We have the mountains that protect us from a lot of really bad weather. And so this really stood out. It was Hurricane Hugo, and it was a big one. It was very big. And my parents live on about 5 acres, and there's trees all around our house. And so we're literally inside the house watching the trees fall all around us, in the front yard, in the backyard. But it was a scary moment. And as a 11 or 12-year-old, whatever I was at the time, it made a deep impression on me as I watched these big trees that I had played in. These were a safety and a security for me. They were my imaginary forest that I would, go out and play in or build things in or whatever. They're falling because of the strength of this storm. And I'd never seen a storm that strong before. And so today I look at that and I know that those trees fell as opposed to some of the others at my parents' property that didn't fall because they were older or because they didn't have the depth or the strong root system to be able to withstand the storm. And so I apply that to my kids and I say, I want you to be able to stand. When the storms come, I want you to be able to stand. There was this moment in my early parenthood. My boys shared a room for a lot of years. And I went in to pray for them one night after they were already asleep. And I just went in and I was laying hands on them. And you know how kids are when they're asleep.
Yeah.
They're so cute.
Yeah.
They're so precious and
quiet.
innocent and quiet. Exactly. And so I'm looking at them and I had this moment where I was just overwhelmed with their innocence. And I started to think about all that was coming for them and about how our very real enemy was going to try to kill, steal, and destroy from them. And like the challenges that they would face and the way the world would try and rip them away, because that is our reality. If we don't think that's happening, we're naive, because the world is out to get our children. The enemy is out to get our children. So I'm in their rooms looking at them all precious, and I'm praying in a moment of motherly emotion, Lord, would you please keep them from evil? Keep them from that. I don't want them to go through that, Lord. Keep them from that. So the next morning, I went to my Bible study, and I was sharing that with some of the ladies. And this precious older saint said to me, whose kids were already grown, she said to me, Brooke, you're praying for the wrong thing. And I was like, what do you mean I'm praying for the wrong? You're just taking my really sweet moment and throwing it right out the door. And she said, no, I'm not saying that you shouldn't pray for that ever. But what I'm saying is they are going to face temptations. Evil is going to give them an opportunity to find it. You know, wisdom calls aloud from the streets, but so does foolishness. Yeah. Scripture gives us both pictures. They are going to face temptations. Instead of praying, Lord, keep them from that, pray that when they come to it, they'll stand. And the only way that they can stand is if their roots are deep enough and if they're getting enough nourishment so that when the storm comes, they can stand up. So
Boy,
that's what
so
God
good.
taught me.
I think it's a beautiful way that you've portrayed that journey we all have as that innocent child. That's why I think why Jesus said, you want to see the kingdom of God, look at children. They're just bold, honest, having fun. I mean, it is. The Lord loved kids. And I think it's because they're not sullied yet by the terrors of this world, right? And you saw that as a mom, and I certainly have seen that as a dad. And then things begin to happen. Selfishness, sin, whatever it might be. And that rootedness is so critical, and that love that you talked about. So, Brooke, this has been great. Thank you so much. And what a reminder, praying for teen boys, partner with God for the heart of your son. I think God's all in. The question is, are you all in? And that's what you're trying to do, is rally the church to do the right thing. So thank you for being with us.
Absolutely.
It's been good. It's gone by fast. If you want a copy, maybe your grandparent and your adult kids need to read this, and you can partner with the Lord as a grandparent too, to be praying for your grandsons and granddaughters. So get a copy. If you can make a gift of any amount, like we often do, monthly or a one-time gift, we'll send you a copy of Brooke's book. And it's our way of saying thank you for being part of the ministry.
Yeah, contact us today. The link is in the description below, or call 800, the letter A, and the word family. And on behalf of the entire team, thanks for joining us today for Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back next time as we once again help you and your family thrive in Christ.